Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm going to give YouTube a try. Look at me. I'm a YouTuber now. I wonder how many followers I'll have. Okay, let's continue reading Flying Solo. We left off on page 20. I can't show you the story as I do it on my usual video. So on YouTube, I'm going to read from the book, and you'll have to open up your book. I really think you should. By following along in your book, you'll be able to, locate information in the text later. If you're looking for an answer to a question, you'll be more familiar with the text and the way it's laid out, and you'll be able to look at like how dialogue is punctuated and the way in which the story is written. So the chapter is called The Principal's Office, and this is Flying Solo by Ralph Fletcher. It's 7:56 a.m. School is about to start. The principal's office. Edwin Peacock sat in his office listening to Peggy Ransom. He had the door closed and a rubber band wrapped tight around his thumb. Peggy was the mother of a student, Christopher, in Mr. Fabiano's sixth grade class. More important, she was the PTA president. Okay, so Parent-Teacher Association is kind of like the PTO here. And, one thing that's different is that these students are in an elementary school. How would your year be different if you were still a part of the elementary school? Would you enjoy having another year of elementary, being the oldest kids in the building? Perhaps this year you would have benefited by being in the building more, since the elementary stayed in session longer than we did during COVID. I don't know. It is what it is. I kind of like that you guys move over here and start to become part of the upper grades. I think you're ready for the challenge. It's fun. All right. I'll tell you this. A lot of parents in the district are concerned about the sixth grade team of yours, Mrs. Ransom said, deeply concerned. Pat Kiefer is one teacher who never should have been hired. Sally Walker is in that class. Her mother is a close friend of mine, and according to her, Pat Kiefer does not teach. Every day after school, she asks Sally, "What did you learn today?" And Sally just stares at her. Learned? Huh? Okay. This woman reminds me of Grace Wexler. She's a little sassy. Okay, Mr. Peacock leaned forward and rubbed his temples. As a principal, he listened to lots of different parents, but there was nobody worse than Peggy Ransom. He dreaded his weekly chats with this woman, with her Jaguar, oh, that's a fancy car, and her $500 leather jackets, hello, the rings that sported enormous diamonds on both hands. He closed his eyes. 98% of the parents in the district were wonderful, but the other 2% made him wish he worked as a farmer or a forest ranger. Those would be good jobs too. Dana Friedman is supposed to be your superstar, but she's gone to conferences half the time, Mrs. Ransom was saying. I mean, what good is she if she's always out of the classroom? Myrna Riley has her kids brainwashed into following every liberal cause she can get her hands on. And then you've got that cutie pie, Sal Fabiano. Can't read. There's something very strange going on in that class. As far as I can see, he doesn't do any skill work at all. Kids like him, sure, but he doesn't make them work. All the kids do is read and write. Whatever happened to teaching spelling or grammar? Ooh, I'm kind of guilty of that. I don't really like teaching spelling. I feel like you learn it best in the elementary. It's important when you're kind of taking on language. But at this point, if you're not a good speller, doing it over and over again usually doesn't have a lot of success. I find that you can become a good speller by reading more. I certainly did. When I was your age, I was the most horrific speller. You would not believe that I became an English teacher. But yeah, it's interesting. All right, Erwin Peacock tried to make it look as if he were listening hard. The woman's voice was about as pleasant as a chainsaw. He could feel it cutting into him. Ooh, that's good imagery. Okay, Peggy, I hear you, Mr. Peacock said, breaking the rubber band wrapped around his thumbs. But my hands are tied. There's no way I can make any changes in that sixth grade team, especially not now at the end of the year. You must. I think it's disgraceful, Peggy Ransom said, storming out of his office. She swept past Mrs. Pierce's desk, the secretary, and knocked a stack of phone messages on the floor. One of the phone messages fell against the radiator where it got caught out of sight. I wonder if that was the message that the substitute teacher called in sick for Mr. Fabiano's class. I've got a good mind to pull my son out of this place and put him in a decent private school, Peggy said loudly, where teachers understand the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which, by the way, reading's the only one that starts with an R, and aren't afraid to teach them. Mr. Peacock called after her, I hope you don't, but you have that right, and thinking, I should only be so lucky. If she pulled her kid, then he wouldn't have to have these meetings, right? Okay, so we're going to see, is Peggy Ransom right? Is this school not a great school? Is Mr. Fabiano a good teacher? This is an idea we're going to revisit later. We're going to talk about what makes a good teacher and what makes a good student. It'll be interesting. Okay, I'm on page 23. It's 8:12, and this is called First Bell. Rachel stood with Missy on the playground. At exactly 8:10, she gave Missy a see you in a minute look and slipped in through the door. So remember, Rachel doesn't speak, and Missy's her best friend. She had almost reached her classroom when the first bell rang. Rachel loved coming to class early because it gave her a few quiet moments alone with Mr. Fabiano. Remember, she has a crush on him. All right. He would stand at her desk talking to her, never pressuring her to talk back, and it was a pleasure simply to be near him and feel his words wash over her. Now she entered room 238 and looked around, but the room was empty. Where was Mr. Fabiano? Rachel wondered. Then she spied the large block letters on the chalkboard. Class 6-238. So they're sixth grade in room 238. So that's what they're called, which means to me that there's probably, several different sections of sixth grade. And their school is in the elementary, so Mr. Fabiano is their teacher all day long. They don't switch classes the way you do. Good morning. You will have a substitute teacher today. I know you will give Mrs. Muchmore the same respect and attention you would give me. You all know the routine for Friday. See you on Monday, Mr. Fabiano. Okay, and it's in all caps to show us that it's different. I like it when authors play around with the font of the story, and if I were an author, I would have a lot to say about the structure of my book, what it looks like. And I'm sure it's probably hard to make decisions about publishing because when you do fancy things, it makes the book more expensive. For example, if you had like gold gilded edges and illustrations, it would raise the cost. Okay. Rachel stamped her foot, and the sharp sound echoed in the deserted classroom. Substitute, as if anyone could substitute for Mr. Fabiano. It was the worst, most depressing way to start the day. And it was Friday, which meant 3 whole days without Mr. Fabiano. The weekend was ruined. Boy, she's really obsessed. Okay. She drifted over to where Tommy Feathers used to sit. A photograph of Tommy hung on the wall, but Rachel turned away from the grinning face and glanced at his old desk. She reached down and quickly touched the surface, running her thumb over the place where a heart had been carved into the wood and the letters TF for Tommy Feathers and RW for Rachel White, crudely cut inside the heart. Missy came into the room and stared at the blackboard. Oh, no, not a sub, said Missy, reading. What a bummer. Okay, pause. One thought. We know that Rachel hated the way that Tommy Feathers adored her. He gave her things all the time. He wrote poems and stories for her and carved her name into the desk. He was obsessed with her. Hey, wait, Rachel's obsessed with her teacher. Do you think Mr. Fabiano knows? How could he not know? And does he find it annoying? What kind of person is he? We're going to find out. Okay. Rachel and Missy had been best friends since second grade. Before Rachel stopped talking, they'd get on the phone and lose track of time in deep talks about boys, music, religion, God, ghosts, ESP, telepathy. Okay, ESP is extrasensory perception. When you can know what somebody is, when you kind of like have a sixth sense, things that other people aren't aware of. And telepathy is reading people's minds. They agreed that it is possible to read another person's thoughts if you are close enough. I don't know. Do you get to know someone so well that you can predict what they're going to say? Or do you know what they're thinking? Interesting. What's your opinion on that? Missy was fat. Whoa. Okay. So again, here's an example of something I would never like it's inappropriate sort of. And yet this book is attempting to be super realistic. Missy was fat. Rachel often wondered if Missy's own problems helped her to understand Rachel's. Missy knew what it was like to have kids point fingers and make nasty comments, whisper behind her back. She knew what it was like to have someone eat something eating at you from the inside. More than anybody else, Missy accepted Rachel's silence. Other kids got all nervous and chatty around Rachel, but not Missy. When they were together, Missy didn't try to fill the dead space with lots of empty chit-chat the way most kids did. The silence always felt light and easy between them. Loud laughter outside the door. Karen and Jasmine raced into the room. "I won," Karen laughed. Karen said, laughing and breathing hard. "They won," Jasmine said, pointing. "Hey, Missy. Hi, Rachel." Last fall, when Rachel stopped talking, she stopped smiling too. Now she gave the girls a small wave as a gesture intended to mean hello. At the beginning of the year, Rachel considered Karen and Jasmine close friends. After Rachel stopped talking, the other two girls still acted friendly toward her, but things were somehow different now. I'm on the top of page 26, and I cannot emphasize how important it is that you follow along, because the constant conversations, the dialogue, you'd have a hard time understanding who's talking and what's going on if you can't see the words. Anyway, Jasmine was saying, I would have beat you if you hadn't tripped me." "Tripped you?" The girls took seats next to each other on the other side of the room. "You tripped yourself." Christopher Ransom, remember that's Peggy Ransom's son, the woman who was in the principal's office. Christopher Ransom lumbered into the room. "I'm ready to go home now," he announced, flopping down on his desk and stretching out 2 big feet. Christopher's mother was the president of the PTA. His father was a heart surgeon. Christopher liked to brag about his father cutting people up. He was rich, loud, and obnoxious. Okay, so those are 3 character traits: rich, loud, and obnoxious. Interesting. Jessica and Vicky came in next. Rachel thought they looked a little funny together since Vicky was so short and Jessica was the tallest kid in the class. "Oh, a sub," Jessica groaned, seeing the note on the blackboard. "Fact," Christopher smirked. He rubbed his hands gleefully. And what better way to end the week than tormenting some brain-damaged sub? Nobody would ever say that, would they? Is this realistic? Christopher's voice put Rachel on edge. The kid was annoying beyond belief. To help tune him out, she watched the rest of the class enter the room. Tim and Jordan ran in laughing, with Robert and Corey right behind. Robert and Corey were part of a set of triplets. The third triplet, Josh, was in Mrs. Riley's class. Then Rhonda came in and plopped down next to Missy. "My last day," Bastian shouted as he entered the room. "I thought you said Monday was your last day," Karen said. My dad changed plans, Bastian said. Farewell, peons. I'm leaving you for the beaches of Hawaii. You look great in a hula skirt. In a hula skirt, Jessica told him. You should talk, String Bean, Bastian retorted. Remember that time you wore a dress? I laughed so hard I almost peed my pants. Shut up, Bastian, Rhonda said. Bastian had a mean streak, and Rachel didn't trust him. He had moved into town just before the beginning of 6th grade and immediately made his presence felt by teasing kids in the class. He invented nasty little nicknames for just about everybody. Missy was Thunder Thighs, Vicky the Shrimp, Jessica String Bean. He called Tommy Feathers the Professor, or sometimes Dr. Drool. Sean O'Day walked into the room and quietly took his seat at the back of the room. He was slender with a pale, sleepy complexion. Rachel noticed that he was wearing the same Chicago Bulls t-shirt he had worn the day before. Now he glanced at her shyly and busied himself digging into his backpack. You are my... this is so hard to sing. Okay, you are my Sean... Okay, it's Sean. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Christopher sang loudly. You make me happy when skies are gray. Christopher is obnoxious. Leave me alone, Bastian told him. Not funny. Opinion, Christopher grinned. Okay, throughout this whole novel, Christopher keeps saying fact and opinion. What is a fact? A fact is something that can be proven. What's an opinion? It's when you believe something, but you have no proof for it. Okay. Sean and Bastian had one thing in common. Sean's father, like Bastian's, had served in the Air Force. Sean's father had left the military years ago, but Bastian said that didn't matter. Air Force is Air Force, once and forever. Sean was the one kid Bastian never picked on, and he wouldn't let anyone else pick on him either. The newest kid in class, Sky Reed, came in last. He had moved from Southern California in January, tall and lanky. Sky had an earring and wore his blonde hair in a long braid. Bastian teased him about the earring. He and Sky got into a fight on the playground. Nobody won the fight, but Bastian's lip got cut. And after that, nobody teased Sky about the earring or anything else. Where's the sub? Tim asked, drumming on the desk. He was another boy who always made Rachel edgy. You watched that high school baseball game? They kicked Southside's butt. Anybody watch Star Trek last night? That was pretty freaky. Hey, so where's the sub? What would it be like for you guys? Imagine there's no distance learning. Everybody's in session. A whole class, 28 kids in one room. You know how small my room is. And the sub isn't showing up. How would you guys behave? Sub is short for subhuman, Bastian said. Looks like she ditched us. Christopher started singing. We got ditched by a ditzy submarine, a ditzy submarine. That's a Beatles song. I don't know if you know it. Not funny, Vicky said. Not even close. Opinion, Christopher replied smugly. Mr. Peacock came over the loudspeaker to make the morning announcements. Good morning, he said. Today is Friday, April 28th. Fact, Christopher said. It's a beautiful spring day, Mr. Peacock said. Opinion, Christopher smirked. Shut up, Rhonda told him. Mr. Peacock proceeded to run through the day's business. Sign-ups for jazz band, no cheerleading practice. Track meet next Thursday, bring in cans for the food drive. Important reminder, no hats allowed in school. Please stand for the pledge, Mr. Peacock said. All right, these kids are alone. Are they going to stand up for the pledge? What would you do? Kids looked around, unsure what to do. Bastian got up first. That was one thing his father had taught him. You stand for the flag, always. When Bastian stood up, the other boys started getting out of their seats. Soon the whole class was pledging in ragged unison. One nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. They sat down. Still no sub. This lady must be totally clueless, Bastian said, loudly cracking his knuckles. Opinion, Christopher said. It could be a man, Jessica said. A fact, Christopher put in. I am begging you, Rhonda told Christopher. Shut up. Attendance, Karen said from the front of the room. Who's absent? I am, Christopher said. I wish, Rhonda retorted. John's out, Bastian said. Really? Remember, John called him in the morning? David's not coming in, Robert said. He got an asthma attack yesterday. Melinda's sick too, Vicky said. Rachel watched Karen fill out the attendance, checking off present or absent. Her eyes lit on Tommy Feather's empty desk. There was no place on any attendance form to check off dead. How many hot lunches? Karen said. Who elected you, teacher? Bastian demanded. Well, she's class president, Jessica pointed out. That is her job. Hot lunch? Karen asked again, ignoring Bastian. What are they having? Corey asked. You don't want to know, Rhonda said. Grease ball pizza, guaranteed 90% soaked in grease. Karen counted 8 hot lunches, 5 chocolate milks, 3 white milks. Okay, who wants to bring it to the office? Karen asked. Me. Rachel thought it was funny the way everybody raised their hands by habit, even without a teacher. It made her want to smile, but she didn't. Rachel watched Karen standing there, deciding whom to pick. She really admired Karen. The girl was a born leader. Her neat black bangs and her dark eyes gave her a no-nonsense look. People took her seriously. Come to think of it, Karen said, I'll go myself. No fair, Tim moaned. Hey, Jessica said, don't forget to tell them about the sub. Don't worry, Karen said, bouncing out of the room. I will give a lecture while she's gone, Christopher announced. No, you won't, Rhonda told him. Why not? Tim shot back. Ever hear of the First Amendment? He has the right to free speech. He has the right to be quiet, Rhonda retorted. Rachel folded her arms. It was more than that, much more. Not just the right to be silent, but the right to remain silent. It was the right protected by federal law. So what do you think? Do people have the right not to talk? There's been a controversy in distance learning if you have the right to have your camera off or not. What do you think? What complications would arise if somebody chose not to speak for 6 months? It'd be challenging. Okay, one more chapter. We're on page 32. Main office. Helen Pierce had been the school secretary for nearly 30 years, but had never gotten used to the frantic pace of the mornings. She took a sip of coffee and closed her eyes, trying to think. There was a nagging splinter in her mind, someone she was supposed to call, something she had to do, but what? Who? We know. This is called dramatic irony, when we, the reader or the audience, know something that the characters don't know, right? We know that the sub is not going to show up. The sub called in sick, but the secretary forgot because the note she wrote down got flown off her desk when that parent came in and walked by and pushed over all those notes. One of the notes fell in behind the heat register on the wall. So there's no sub. But the secretary doesn't remember. My mind is a sieve. Okay, what's a sieve, you guys? It looks like a colander or a strainer, like when you make pasta and you pour it in over the sink to let the water out. That's a sieve. So anything in her brain is just falling right through. She said to Shelley Fields, a parent who often helped out in the office. I can't imagine why, Shelley laughed. I mean, it's so peaceful around here. Helen grunted and got up to pour herself another cup of coffee. Already it had been one of those mornings full of crises. Peggy Ransom's tirade. A tirade is when you throw a fit. a boy who swore at the bus driver, 2 kids who had to be sent home because of head lice, a leaky pipe in the gym. On top of all that, an iguana had escaped from its cage in one of the science rooms. And it was barely 9 a.m. On mornings like this, she pictured her mind as a glass that has broken and shattered into countless tiny, transparent pieces so small you can't find them until you step on one and get cut. I like that image. It's a neat way to describe it. That's one of, I think, the nice qualities of this book is Ralph Fletcher. He does really realistic writing, but also the way he describes things is unique. You picture them. Imagery is when something's described so well you can see it. Back at her desk, she went over the phone messages one by one. There were 6 messages, and she'd taken care of them all. Erwin Peacock opened his door a crack and stuck out his head. "You have a minute?" he asked her. "We need to plan for the assembly this afternoon, the storyteller. There's going to be some local press." "All right," Helen said. She turned to Shelley. "Can you cover the phones for 10 minutes?" "Sure thing," Shelley replied. Helen disappeared inside Mr. Peacock's office. A minute later, Karen Ballard appeared in the doorway. Shelley knew Karen. Everyone did. Karen was one of the brightest, most confident students in the entire school, although today she looked a little unsure of herself. "Hello there, Karen," Shelley said. What can I do for you?" Karen hesitated a moment, then put a piece of paper on the desk. "A lunch count and attendance sheet for 6-238. How do you think they say that? 6238? I don't know. "Thank you. Anything else?" "No, that's all," Karen said. She smiled and hurried out of the room. What did Karen fail to do? She did not tell anyone in the office that they don't have a substitute. Now, she's a good student. She's a rule follower. She's a leader. What's her plan? What would you do? If you came to my class and there was no substitute and you ran down to the office to tell them who's absent and who's present, what would you do? Okay. And here's another sign that this book is 22 years old. Now we do attendance by computer, so it'd be hard for the kids to do that. You'd need to know a password for a teacher's computer. But back then, you used to take it down on paper, so will they miss the teacher? Okay, we're done for the day. The next chapter is called Kids Rule. Oh, we'll see how this works out. Thanks for listening, guys.